Hey everybody, it's Ken here from TreatWorks. This is video 136. As you see, I have Iram on the line with me again, and this was our second of our planned calls. Iram, thanks for joining me. The topic really that we're going to talk today is a continuation of last week, where I talked a bit about the virtual world and a lot of trade shows coming in the virtual world. And over the past few months, everything has kind of come to a grinding halt the way we used to do business. A lot of the face-to-face no longer happens. And in the world of business development and the consumer packaged goods, trade shows were a huge part of the business. And we've seen in the pet industry, the Canadian National Pet Show went virtual. The PJAC National Show was done September 14th and 15th, but it was done virtually. And the advantage here is able to extend it beyond just the 2-day in-person show, that the data, the presentations are all being held live, and they're going to run for another full month. So that gives people who didn't have a chance to get to the show an opportunity to see, to buy. The same thing with Super Zoo, one of the largest trade shows, pet trade shows in North America. Has been canceled and moved online. So it's a WPA 365. As TreatWorks, I put in a booth. So my booth is up and active. Customers actually, not consumers because it's a customer show. Customers can log on to the show and peruse all the booths. It'll actually be up for a full year. So it gives that virtual world that ability for people to go and see brands and experience things on their own time. And there's benefits and negatives to both of it. And I think, if we look at it from the standpoint of a brand owner, what's in it for us? Well, it's 365 days of potential exposure. But what are the risks? Well, the risks are if somebody's not necessarily at the booth, they walk in on their own time, there's no face-to-face engagement. And so if your information isn't robust, if it's not compelling, it's kind of like an empty shopping cart. Somebody's come in, they've seen something, and they walk away. And that's a risk and a challenge to everybody. So Iram, if we think of it from your point of view and perspective with other brands that you've been working on or with, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the virtual world.
Yeah, what you're describing happening in the pet industry is the same in the natural food space. CHFA Connect is happening right now versus having live shows, whether in Vancouver or to be in Toronto right now. So brands in the natural food space need to figure this out. Brands in the beauty industry who used to go to IBE to introduce their brands to all the beauty giants out there, those shows aren't happening. How I think about it's a challenge because it's the personal relationship context or the communication context. It's quality versus quantity, where I like quality over quantity in 99% of things that I do. But when you're talking about this virtual world, it creates this massive advantage that changes things for brands in general. So that changes, I can now do more with my time. I'm not losing time on a plane. I'm not spending 3 full days plus 2 days travel plus building and tearing down booths to have booths. I'm saving tons of money that I can redeploy to facilitate other elements of my business, including the same goal of business development. And so quantity can increase in terms of engagement. And so the real hard part, this is the part that I think brands need to be very thoughtful about, and salespeople, you and I, need to be very thoughtful about, is as we lean in on quantity and we don't have that easy quality of, hey, I'm a really great person and I make a compelling case when I'm in a trade show booth with you, how do I go from that to quality through this, or through less than this before I even get a Zoom call? How do I make my digital sell sheet as compelling as possible? We started to talk a little bit about that. How do I make my video stories make sense for my buyers? How do I really, really, really think about the people I want to engage with when I don't have that ability to shake their hand? And how do I get them to want to shake my hand, at least virtually, so I can have an interaction where I can be more compelling? once we have that actual interaction.
And so
So
do you think, and that's great. So again, from your perspective, where do you think as a brand or a salesperson, where should be the first place we're investing?
huh, wow, great question. I think the same as consumer content. When it comes to customer content, that's where you need to invest. So you need to be able to have high quality content that engages with your audience. So if you're building out a consumer website, this is like one of the first things that any marketing agency is going to talk to you about. Well, likewise, as a brand who's trying to connect with new retailers in a broad distribution of retailers, some of whom are super important, and some of whom will help you build out your fan base, right? Like the people who will ultimately lead to consumption. You need to think about what is the content that's compelling to them, and what is the format of that content that is compelling to them. And I don't really know that anybody has solved this at scale. I mean, I think ECRM thinks they have, range me, but I'm not convinced, and I like them, by the way. Like
Yeah, they've
I'm
done great.
yeah, and I'm an advocate of at least signing up for their premium services, and at least making your brand case compelling there. But I'm not convinced that anybody's got it quite right yet. And it's still early days. So for obvious reasons, people don't have it quite right yet. Like, how are you supposed to have gotten it right? You need to start with what you're good at and figure out how to turn that into this new world. And not everybody's, well, very few people have already done that.
And
Like
I think the challenge, it's on both sides, right? Because as a sales guy, I'm used to kind of having product in front of me and being able to sit across the table, engage in a conversation. Now, all of a sudden, I've got to change the way I present myself. But at the same time, the buyers have to change the way they receive everything, right? Now, all of a sudden, they're again used to the give and take. They're used to the conversations. They're used to being able to ask questions and get something immediately in terms of either a response right away or at least a promise of a follow up when they're asking about profitability, asking how it's going to grow their category, asking the types of things that happen in that face to face that don't happen when they walk into a virtual booth and they just see an image of somebody's product and go, okay, so I've seen 73 different versions of peanut butter or whatever it happens to be. So how is yours different?
So I think talking about the big pain point of this virtual world, which is it's actually like the virtual world for consumer brands talking to retailers has changed into what anybody in B2B biz dev has had to deal with for forever. And to some degree, we were dealing with prior to this virtual world, which is you need to, I don't know if it's the right way of framing it, but to like drip your way into people's consciousness, right? So like, how do you create a point of engagement that they're somewhat compelled to engage? How do you re-engage with them? How do you take that additional level of engagement, constantly adding value? Constantly, I think you offered 4 bullet point things that would come to your, like you would be instantly, it's topics you need to be able to address in a coherent, meaningful way with a buyer. But if you're just spitting it at people in this digital environment, like on a PowerPoint slide or whatever, is going to be some silly thing that's showing on a screen. If a buyer clicks on a link, that's not going to work, right? Nobody wants to read that and learn like that. I don't think anybody wants to. So, you need to be able to deal with the fact that it might take longer. You need the tools. So these virtual trade shows hopefully are going to continue to improve their tools to help you drive that second level of engagement and third level of engagement. That's where the added value that those virtual trade shows can actually bring value to me, because otherwise I can figure it out. Like I can figure out how to talk to the right people. I can figure out how to reach out to the right people. But if there's a tool that'll facilitate and ensure that both the brand and the retailer are interested in that sort of continuing dialogue, then that's value. But in absence of that, it's on you, it's on me, it's on the brands that we represent or work with or whatever to figure out how to do that. And the problem isn't solved yet. I work on it every day. It's what
Yeah.
I think literally every day.
And who knows where things are going to go? I mean, as we look at the way the business world is changing, the way our world is changing, it'll likely be a while before a lot of the large scale face-to-face meetings or trade shows start to happen. Because no one's really sure exactly when things are going to go. When borders are going to be open and travel is going to be uh, facilitated, or people are going to be more comfortable to do that. I mean, there are going to be locations that will start to open sooner than later, and there will be shows that start, and they may be successful, they may not, because the market may not be ready yet. And I think we have to all learn and just generate new skills. That ability to present yourself in different medium. It's whether or not you're using social media, whether you're doing something, you're adding value. It's part of the reason why I'm at video 136 is it's just how do I put little snippets out there that maybe somebody after finally having seen or consumed some of the content is going to reach out and go, okay, this I've heard this message enough, or I've seen this messaging enough. Like let's understand a little bit more. And I think that's the challenge: is how do you do that without either being too repetitive, or that annoying, like, oh my god, not another one of those.
Not another one. Yeah, not another one. I think you described part of the business case of why people are challenged in actually creating high value content that works in a digital space when you talked about when is it going to come back, the in-person shows. So if you're betting on the in-person shows coming back within the next year, maybe you're like, I don't have enough money to invest both there and here, or maybe you're not even thinking about digital as worth investing in because you're like, I'm going to cash preserve, survive a year, and then go back to the way the world used to be, I guess. I'm sure there are people out there thinking like that. The reality is that the case for being good at content and engagement to all forms of audience, consumer, and in our world to retailers, that case is made. Like if you're asleep on that, you're not gonna win in the future, because even when those in-person trade shows come back, there's still going to be a case for doing all sorts of stuff digitally, and there will still be a need for doing all sorts of stuff digitally. So, if there's one thing that I'm for sure talking to brands that I work with about, it's, be choiceful, but the first choice is that digital engagement stuff, all of it, any of it.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be, as you said, that's going to be a challenge for all of us to figure out. Where do we need to up our game? Where do we need to invest? Where do we need to build those compelling stories and ensure? Because no one knows how or when things are going to return, or to what level of familiarity they will return. But the world has changed. I think organizations have realized that maybe some of the structure that they had or infrastructure they had before is not as relevant moving forward. And so a lot more of the distance communication, virtual communication, digital is going to be required for everybody to just kind of up their game. And so it's going to be on us. It's going to be on us as brand owners. It's going to be on agencies and brokerage firms and others to be able to kind of provide those skills to say to somebody who maybe doesn't know how to do it, hey, I can do that, or I know somebody who does know how to do that. Let me help facilitate that. So
This is how we're doing it.
We
I
can
love
start.
it. We're learning by doing examples in different industries that we can apply to, in different categories and segments that we can apply to other areas by virtue of getting better at making phone calls to stores and sending emails that capture all the things that need to be captured in a meaningful way. And we're able to do things at a scale that you just can't do when you're going door by door, store by store, getting in your car. Our call cycle, the amount of time for a call cycle dramatically has dropped, right?
Yeah.
And the quality is, I easily acknowledge it's slightly lower. Is it of magnitude lower to the magnitude that we're able to engage more in this world now? It's not. So, build out those skills and think through how to do it well for your own brand and business. And you have tremendous opportunity in the way the world is shaping up right now.
No, that's just it, right? I think those that aren't willing to learn are going to at some point cease to exist. because the world is moving, and it's moving at a speed that is going to leave people behind. And those that aren't willing to catch up, aren't willing to adapt, they will get left behind, and they will cease to be relevant. And so that's, I think, the challenge for us is to kind of continue to work on our relevancy, to continue to work on our sustainability, and say, well, what can we do differently? How do I learn? Going back to the old trade show mentality, every day after finishing the day one of the show, write down what worked, what didn't work, what do I need to do differently, and the same at the end of a show. Okay, what worked? Not enough samples, not enough this, not enough that. Well, now as we start to engage digitally, we need to take that same methodology and figure out, okay, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What can I improve on? And then getting the feedback to understand from our partners, from our retailers, from our competitors, keeping an eye on, okay, what are they doing? Wow, they've got engaging graphics, or they've got engaging content. How do I up my game so that I can now kind of play at the speed with which the market's going to move? So awesome. Well, hey, thank you for your time again today. We will keep in touch, and hopefully we'll be able to connect and bring more of this content to our TreatWorks fans and my LinkedIn group and everybody else that's following the content. I appreciate your time today. Awesome. Thanks for everything. We'll reach out again soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.